Ah, good morrow to thee. Now you might be thinking, why has he just said good morrow to thee? That's very old-fashioned. Does he not know it's the current year? Yeah, that would be considered old-fashioned today. But if it was the 17th century, you might be thinking, oh, that's very old-fashioned. You think that's very rude. Because you don't say thee to people if you don't know them particularly well. You know, the same thing in France, even today. You don't use tu when you're talking to somebody that is your superior. You say vous. Now, vous is the plural. Tu is the singular. The same thing with thee. Thou and thee is singular, and you and ye is plural. So when you say thou or thee, you're saying specifically the person you are talking about is the person you are talking directly to. The reason it's rude, it's like a verbal form of pointing. People feel, oh, me? Ah, I feel you've touched me now verbally. That's kind of a bit of an unwanted intimacy there. I don't feel comfortable with that. So I don't think it's particularly surprising that thou and thee got phased out of the English language about the same time as Cromwell was closing theatres and taking all the fun out of Christmas and banning the maypole. It's an unwanted intimacy. And some people don't like unwanted intimacy. They try and get rid of it. And the way of getting rid of it there was to say, well, that's rude. By saying that's rude, you mean that's how people in the country behave. You should be polite and courteous. Because polite means how people in the city behave. Polite from polis, meaning city, and courteous from the court. So there's a bit of language policing from the 17th century. You don't say thou or thee, you say you or ye. Make it clear that you're not talking specifically about me. Don't point verbally, wave in general direction verbally. Which makes it like, sometimes I think it's a shame that got removed from the language. Because it did mean that when I was ranting at Liana, I'm saying you did this and you did that. It sounds like, am I saying Liana did it, or am I saying you feminist did it? Because it's not clear whether you is you plural or you singular. Well, we can thank the Puritans for that, they got rid of that. They didn't like the intimacy of the second person singular. Now, of course, the Western culture isn't the only culture in which intimacy has been frowned upon. Day-to-day intimacy has been frowned upon. For example, in India, it's impolite to make eye contact with somebody. You're supposed to keep your eyes lowered, unless you know them really well. Which means that when trying to deal with people of any other culture, it looks like they're all lying to you, because we associate eye contact with honesty. The way the feminists, or let's say the radical feminists, I don't know, it is just the radical feminists. You judge for yourself whether this seems particularly radical or particularly mainstream. The way they sort of like, they don't like unwanted intimacies like saying darling. You don't say darling to somebody, you don't know them very well. You have to make sure that they're comfortable with you saying darling to them before you call them darling. Because that could be an unwanted intimacy. It's an intimate way of talking to somebody, isn't it, saying darling. Telling somebody to smile, for example. Give us a smile. It's an unwanted intimacy. How they make unwanted intimacies socially unacceptable is they've sort of made a continuum of unwanted intimacies, a spectrum of unwanted intimacies, if you like, that begin with things like saying darling or telling somebody to smile, or requesting a smile, and goes all the way up to rape, which is, I think, perhaps the worst kind of unwanted intimacy of all. That's an unwanted intimacy that everyone would agree was beyond the pale. But do they call this the unwanted intimacy scale or the unwanted intimacy continuum? No, they call it the rape continuum, don't they? They've named that continuum after the worst end of it, the nastiest end of it. And by naming that continuum after the nastiest end of it, they've made everything along the continuum seem equally unacceptable. So, you might wonder why I'm doing this in what is supposed to be the prologue to the third chapter of my reply to Liana K. And the reason is because in the two previous videos I said she's not a Nazi, but if we use the same rhetoric, that there is a continuum that we are going to name after the nastiest end of that continuum. Then Liana K is on the Nazi continuum. Now, I've been looking at our Feedback Friday, and there's a few things I want to comment about our Feedback Friday before we go into the last third of the trilogy, because I was been rather nice up until now, and I feel disappointed in her responses. I feel actually she hasn't taken her own advice, and it's made me question the sincerity of her claimed intent. Alright, let's have a look at just a sneaky little peek of the Feedback Friday.
I decided to show cats today because a lot of the comments this week were a garbage fire.
What? What, is this not the way an adult's supposed to behave when they've had some sort of form of criticism? Jesus Christ. Shall needs to have cuddly toys and kittens. And, you know, this is... I think you're going to get taken seriously. Oh, come on, please.
Certain things mean that people are unable to conduct themselves like grown-ups. Kitten!
I know, it's terrible, isn't it? Some people just can't act like grown-ups.
And this is really disappointing, I admit. I gave people the benefit of the doubt, especially on that message to anti-feminist video, and for my trouble, I got a lot of name-calling, a lot of people calling me an idiot. One person, apparently speaking for a very prominent anti-feminist, called me a retard.
I know who it was who called her a retard. It was Hannah Wallen from the Honey Badgers. The difference, I suppose, between me and the Honey Badgers have been doing for a long time. They're battle weary. They've been trying for so long. They're battle weary. They're jaded by experience. Whereas I'm kind of naive and optimistic. That's like naive optimism. I hope that there's a possibility of a mutually respectful dialogue is credible. I don't think she does mutually respect us. It's kind of disappointing, really. I think my optimism, I feel, has taken a bit of a battering here. But then, you know, the word retard is a term that's used to describe people with learning difficulties that's fallen out of favour, mainly because it got used as a playground insult. You know, anyone who's stupid, you say, retard! So you couldn't call people with learning difficulties retards anymore. Which you used to be able to. You used to say, oh, he's retarded. You don't talk about people retarded anymore, because if you do, it sounds like you're using the same thing as a playground insult. But I think if it describes somebody with learning difficulties and it's accurate, Liana has learning difficulties. She hasn't learned. And she's been mistreated by the feminists herself. I mean, she's been mistreated by feminists. She's been excommunicated by feminists. She's had abuse from feminists. And yet she's still saying, well, no, but not all feminists. Yeah, you haven't learned. The learning curve for Liana is really flattened. As mine was, in fact. I can't even blame her. I was a bit of a retard when it came up to rising up to the problems of feminism. I kept going, oh, not all of them, not all of them, not all of them. You know, so many of them that you've got to say there is something in the mimetic makeup of feminism that means that these problems are always going to arise. And it's true to say not all feminists. Not all feminists is true, but so what? There's something in the mimetic makeup of feminism that means that these kind of attitudes are going to prevail. Always. Over and over again. Having said that, given I did talk about the horseshoe effect, I think that the problems of feminism are problems that is imported from traditions. If feminism was fully opposed to traditional gender roles, then it wouldn't be like this. But it isn't. It wants to hold on to traditional gender roles that benefit women. They're women's advocacy movement. They only advocate for what women want. So they're only going to attack those traditional gender roles that disadvantage women in some way. And maybe attack some of those that advantage men in some way. But they're not going to attack any of them that advantage women, and they're not going to attack any of them that disadvantaged men because they're not motivated to. We are.
Right. Midna's cute. Yeah, the reason she's called Midna, you see she's got the white tummy, and then she's got these little patterns on her back.
We don't care about the bloody cats.
And you still have some of the deworming medicine on from this morning.
Great anecdote.
But there was one comment that even though they accused me of straw manning and were snarky as anything, at least asked some questions, at least made a point, instead of just name calling, going, no, you're wrong. That's not what feminism is about. No, you're wrong. That's not what MRM is about. No, you're wrong.
This is somebody who's advocating for arguing like an adult. Can we just speak an adult about this? No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. So you just called them retards. The voice you just did was the retard voice. You just called them retards. That's that voice going. You just called them retards like you were in a schoolyard, Liana, and you're saying to them, "Can we please act like adults?" Whilst surrounded by cuddly toys and kittens. I don't think I did that to you. At no point I have laughed at you. I'm sorry, but you're absurd sometimes, and if you're absurd, I can't help but love you. But I've never gone, yeah, that's what I mean. She doesn't. I know she don't talk like this. You haven't got the moral high ground and telling me to act like adults, have you?
I can't have a discussion like that. I can't. This is all about a dialogue, and you guys had a chance, and for the vast majority, you blew it.
So whereabouts has Liana come on that? Well, should we call it the Nazi continuum? Because she clearly thinks she's morally superior, and she also feels that she can talk down to the plebs like us. And she's dictatorial. There you go. You one strike, 2 more and you're out. So she's dictatorial. She thinks she's superior, and she thinks we're all plebs. And there's a bit more that puts us somewhere on the Nazi continuum, but we don't know where yet. Whereabouts is she on the Nazi continuum?
That people like me aren't the silent majority. They're an increasingly insignificant minority in an increasingly bigoted and regressive movement. Maybe among gaming and maybe among tech, but the broader populist feminist movement, guys, who has more knowledge about this? Me, who's involved with it and actually talks to people and actually engages with people, or you guys who have only seen the worst of Tumblr?
Just watching that again, I missed something. It just occurred to me. She's saying, oh, you've only seen Tumblr because you don't engage with the real world. Clearly you all live in your basements. You've never actually been out in the outside world. Whereas I go out in the outside world. I interact with the real world, whereas you only exist on the internet. No, I don't think so, Liana. I think people have lives. I think people have lives and they meet real people. I don't think the internet is the entirety of these people's world, any more than it is yours. How patronising and arrogant can you be? Alright, I'm going to say where I think she is on the Nazi scale now, the Nazi continuum. I think she's about the place where a white colonialist in the 19th century sees the people in the third world. I think that's whereabouts she is. I think she sees men the way a white colonialist will see the indigenous peoples of India or something. She's benevolent. She's a benevolent dictator. She's come in. She goes, no, I really care about these people. These people are really nice. Now, you must stop antagonising the British. Yes, the British you see shoot you with guns, but who knows more about the British? Me, who's a British person, or you, the people who are natives of India? Just because you get shot at by British people, there are plenty of British people at home who just sit there drinking tea. That's where she is. She thinks she's superior. She thinks she knows far more about what it is to be a feminist than us because she's a feminist. And she knows lots of feminists that are lovely to her because why wouldn't they be? She thinks our experiences are invalid because we've only seen the bad ones. and a whole dictatorial attitude regarding how we should behave. The way she tries to civilize us. I mean, this is talk about the horseshoe effect. This is a traditionalist idea, isn't it? A traditional idea that women are the civilizers of men. She's acting like the civilizers of men. She's telling us how to behave, how to be good. Yeah, that's why I put her. So on the Nazi continuum, you're about sort of like halfway along. You're kind of like a white imperialist who has positive attitudes about the foreign people. You feel a duty of care of the foreign people. She feels superior, and she feels that we need educating. She doesn't feel that we can educate her because we're so backward. She feels sorry for us. She feels sorry for us because we're so backward and ignorant, living in our mud hut.
Internet is not the real world. It is not mainstream, and people are saying that certain people they don't like are making policy decisions. Jessica Valenti does not make policy decisions, guys. She's an op-ed writer.
Alright, this is a definite straw man, because we were pointing out that radical feminists are involved with making policy decisions, or advising governments on policy decisions, or advising the legal team on policy decisions. In fact, and including the fact that Catherine McKinnon's a legal advisor worldwide. Was Jessica Valenti mentioned in any of these comments? No. So when she says, Jessica Valenti is not making advice on policy issues, yeah, we know. No one said that. No one said that. That is a straw man right there. The amount of times you've gone, oh, it's a straw man, it's a straw man, it's a straw man. That is a straw man. No one said it was Jessica Valenti. People said radical feminists, and they're right. So you've taken a true statement and dismissed it by adding a detail on that made it wrong. It's just dishonest. It's dishonest, Liana. And so, that puts you further along the Nazi continuum.
In government right now, the women's rights advocates are just fighting to not have Roe versus Wade overturned. Like,
do you actually need to be a feminist to be opposed to Roe v. Wade being reversed? I don't think you do. I mean, you just have to be pro-choice. You don't have to be pro-choice to be a feminist. Catherine McKinnon was not pro-choice, and she was a feminist. And you don't have to be anti-abortion to be an anti-feminist. I know loads of anti-feminists that are pro-choice. What's that got to do with anything?
Here's the list of mainstream sources that people claim are radical feminist. Sarkeesian, niche. Video games are a niche.
But the UN isn't a niche. Something like particularly niche about the UN.
According to media. Lacey Green, internet. Jessica Valenti, okay. Mainstream, but again, op-ed writer. Lindy West, don't even know who this is. Marcotte, I think you mean Amanda Marcotte, which is, I think, writes for Slate. Again, website. Penny, don't know. Penny what? Salon, website. BuzzFeed, website. Vox, website. Vice is not mainstream. The Guardian, okay, getting there.
The Guardian is merely getting there. It's a national newspaper. It's pretty. I mean, what do you want it to be? An international newspaper that we're all forced to read? Is that when it becomes mainstream? Secondly, I don't think you can say in this day and age that being on the internet means that you're not mainstream.
Mike, Wired? Wired is a tech magazine. The Mary Sue website, Everyday Feminism, way out there website. Half the damn game trust, niche again, every rag that jumps on a sexism culture, and then a whole bunch of stuff. Maybe one of those. By mainstream, I mean the New York Times. And yes, it does have some feminist writing, but it's not to the level of The Guardian. All right? Mainstream means something that my mother would read.
To be honest, it's not Liana's mother I'm worried about.
The argument over whether someone is mainstream or not misses my greater point. Talk about a straw man argument. My point was, if you're If you oppose these people, don't give them more power. What is the narrative of Anita Sarkeesian? She is horribly attacked online.
Angela Eagle used the same methods as Anita Sarkeesian. Interesting enough, in the Labour Party leadership contest, she started pulling the same trick as Anita Sarkeesian. Like going, oh, I've been a victim. Somebody's put a brick through my office window. And it wasn't her office window. Somebody put a brick through the window of the stairwell in a office block that her office happened to be in. So if Angela Eagle was supposed to be the intended victim of that brick going through a window, then the perpetrator's really lazy. Chances are it was just local vandals, because there'd been other vandalism in the area. It had nothing to do with Jeremy Corbyn supporters, which is probably the same trick. So you have something like that that's going to pull the trick of like going, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. They don't actually even need to actually be a victim. They don't need to be harassed to claim they've been harassed. I don't know if Anita Sarkeesian was harassed or not, but you know she didn't need to be, so I had to pull that trick.
The MRA camp isn't fighting for psychological support in male-dominated fields because every MRA believes the same thing about all things.
This is just fucking mad. So she's been told that her depiction of the MRM is not only limited, it's wrong. I mean, you know, it's just way off in terms of a description of what issues we're talking about. When somebody's turned around and goes, that's not what they're talking about, she goes, oh yeah, like they all talk about the same thing. Well, let's turn that around, see how that would work. So I say, feminists just want the right to walk around with their tits out because they should have the right to walk around with their tits out. That's all feminists want. And then somebody else says, no, that's not what feminists want. Feminists want, they want to protect the rights for women to choose to have abortions, and they want to make sure that women are represented in parliament. Go, oh yeah, like all the feminists want the same thing. That's the same argument you've done in reverse.
I'm immediately on board with the believability of this comment, okay? They're fighting to abolish things like the sentencing cap, gender discrimination in the form of predominant aggressor policy, to have it be called rape when they get raped by a woman, as opposed to the sexual assault misconduct charges that get applied to women, resulting in certain sexual crime policies only applying to males in the context of prosecution. They are demanding alimony reform, the abolishment of default female custody rulings in family court, also to have people prosecuted for offering false testimony in court cases. This is also in regards to things like premarital sex laws in places like India, and in opposition to things like affirmative consent, where a sexual partner is under no obligation to notify their partner that they've revoked consent, even Then he starts talking about trouser snakes. First of all, these are not across-the-board things. Remember what I was saying about states' rights versus federal rights?
It's not across-the-board sort of thing. Nor the ones she was talking about. She was saying, oh, do you know there's some states where it's still illegal for a man to rape his wife? Well, that's not across the board sort of thing. How to rape is illegal in most states. You can wear one or two states. It's not across the board sort of thing, is it, Liana? You're not applying the same logic. All right, bearing in mind here, you say, oh, you're talking about states' rights and that's federal rights, and you're getting federal rights confused with states' rights. She's trying to say that you have a right not to be told to wear certain clothes in order to prevent rape. Now, admittedly, I don't know if that's a particularly useful piece of advice to say, don't wear that, you'll get raped. I think actually studies don't show that there's any psychological link between the way you dress and the odds of getting raped. However, so what? We have a right to not have misinformed advice. We're misinformed advice all the time on different things, aren't we? That's not even law. There's no law saying, there's no law about what you wear, is there? Strange use of saying you have no legitimate rights issues, but there seems to be a flexibility given to what rights mean when they refer to women's rights, and very much a rigid definition of what a right is when it comes to men and what a legitimate right is. And she hasn't talked about the legitimacy of male reproductive rights at any point in this or at any point in the comments.
The sentencing gap. The men's rights movement and the anti-feminists do not own the complaints about the sentencing gap. The first ever feminists at the Seneca Falls Convention, in their declaration that kicked off the whole thing, kicked off the whole idea of a woman's right to vote, talked about the gap in criminal prosecutions, that women were seen as unaccountable under the law if they committed a crime with their husbands. So you guys don't get to own that.
God. Oh, it's just drives me mad. You don't get to own it. You can't, oh, you can't have that as your issue, that's our issue. No, it's not your issue. Because the majority movement don't agree with you. And you're not going to be motivated enough to care. Because that's not women's rights advocacy. And that's what feminism is. Feminism is just women's rights advocacy. We have to do it because we're motivated to do it. You're not motivated to do it if women's rights is your speciality.
That was the first wave feminists that brought that up way back before the anti-feminist movement got started in the 1970s.
We're not the anti-feminist movement. The men's rights movement happens to be anti-feminist. Not the same. Not the same movement. The anti-feminist movement started in the 1970s was anti the ERA. And we're not opposed to the ERA. But many of us have spoken out in favour of the ERA. Secondly, so they were speaking out of it way back then, and they still got nothing done. I didn't realise how crap you were. I'm surprised you even got the vote, given how long it takes to get things done.
The abolishment of default female custody rulings in family courts. Again, I don't know what jurisdiction you're in, but here in Ontario, it is not default female custody rulings. It is status quo custody rulings. So whoever stayed home the most with the kids, whoever was the primary caregiver, gets the children. It is called status quo. And if that happened to be the mother, well, then it's going to be the mother. But if that happened to be the father, then it is the father. It is not default female custody here.
So basically, what the moral of this story is, if you want to be able to see your children, make sure you never go to work. If you go to work, you may lose the chance of seeing your children. That's what she's basically saying. She's basically saying, if you want to maintain contact with your children, from day one, you should demand that you're the one that doesn't work. That's what she's saying. How's that for a double slap in the face? Oh, you've been the one doing all the labour, but you also then told, oh, you can't see kids. Why? Oh, because you were doing so much work. You can't see kids because you were doing so much work. If you'd been doing less work, you could have seen your kids. I don't know how I managed to stay polite with that sort of argument. But let's move on.
That is a fact. So that we can say across the board, that's a scary, scary battle. Just because it is fighting a Supreme Court ruling. And like I said, the fact that there is a greater consistent push to overturn Roe v. Wade than overturn Citizens United, I think just that comparison should be cause for concern. No matter what you feel about Roe v. Wade, Citizens United has caused far greater, long-lasting and reaching damage to the American political system. And in opposition to things like affirmative consent, affirmative consent is, yes, it's growing, but this is something, again, that is not a legal principle. This is something that's going on college campuses. And again, College campuses are not the mainstream. It's not the rest of the world. It's a bubble. It's colleges. And there are a lot of feminists that are concerned about the things that are going on college campuses. They're just not part of the academic structure because the academic structure doesn't really reach that many people. They're out, in the world.
What she seems to be saying is, if there has ever been a feminist anywhere, any point that has spoken out against a feminist issue, then speaking out against that feminist issue is also a feminist issue. And therefore there can be nothing that isn't a feminist issue because some feminists have spoken out against it. As long as an opinion has been represented by a feminist at some point, then it's a feminist issue. And therefore you have to be a feminist. What doesn't take into account is if you're a man, you do not have the authority to pick and choose in feminism. You can't pick and choose what you believe because you were just told you don't know what it's like. So we can't reform feminism from within as men. As much as we might like to, as much as we might see things going on inside feminism that we think, my God, this is dangerous. We can't reform it from within. We can only reform it from without. Now, if there are feminists that want to reform it from within, I'm quite happy to support them. But I can't do that. So I've got to be on the outside. So I've got some sovereignty of my own beliefs. That I can be guided by my own principles rather than having dictated to me by somebody else who can shout me down and tell me you don't know what it's like to be a woman. How can you possibly be a feminist? Oh no, I'm not. I'm a men's rights activist. Yeah, you sort your own closet out. You've got problems in your movement, you sort it out. And we'll sort it out as well. We'll sort it out from without, you sort it out from within.
That is a college campus thing because college campuses are taking it on themselves to prosecute and allegedly resolve these cases, and they're making a hash of it. And this is me on the record saying that. You can never deny someone due process to take care of another ill of society. It's just you're not making anything any better. In fact, you're making it worse. Because once you start clawing back due process, then it's very hard to put that genie back in the bottle.
I think she's agreeing with us here. I think she's agreeing that due process needs to be protected. And we do need to maintain innocent until proven guilty. I think she agrees with us on that. And she also agrees with us that you don't need to go through a court to acknowledge to yourself that something happened to you. So she agrees with us on this issue. So then she's taking it away from us as an issue. We can't have that as a legitimate issue because she agrees with it. So when she agrees with it, it makes it no longer legitimate for us to have that as an issue. Because the very fact that she agrees with it means it's a feminist issue, suddenly. But that's no help if the majority of feminists don't agree with us, is it? Why should we be denied having that as a legitimate issue that we talk about? We talk about, she was saying it was a legitimate feminist issue to stop the Roe versus Wade decision being reversed. Well, you don't have to be a feminist to agree with that. And you clearly don't have to be an MRA to think that due process needs to be protected. Maybe we don't need either. Maybe we don't need either feminists or MRAs. Maybe we just all form our own opinions as individuals. Taste your own medicine, Liana. I'm going to say now, okay, sorry, reversing Roe versus Wade, I agree with that, and I'm an MRA. So you don't get to own that, Liana. You don't get to own that. It's mine. It's mine now. It's our issue now. We're making that a men's rights issue. So stop talking about it. It's going to be a men's rights issue that Roe versus Wade is not reversed. Because, that would make men, fathers of two, are too young to be ready to be fathers. So the reversal of Roe versus Wade is now a men's rights issue, and you can't have it. It's ours now. So you have no legitimate issues. You have no legitimate issues. Any legitimate issues you have are actually men's rights movement issues. Of course, not all MRAs agree that Roe versus Wade shouldn't be reversed. But it doesn't matter. I'm opposing them, aren't I? I'm opposing them for you. You don't need it. It's our issue. This is what you sound like.
This isn't something that there is consensus about across the feminist movement. There are various opinions about this, and I am someone telling you right now, as a feminist, I think affirmative consent is the wrong way to go. I understand the thinking behind it, and I think it's good street proofing. Hello, Miss Rosie. Kitten break. Kitten! I think it's good street proofing to teach, especially young men, that unless you're hearing yes, take it as a no. It's good street proofing.
Will there be lessons for women to teach them not to test a male resolve? Test how much he cares. Don't test a man. Don't test how much he cares. Don't test how into you he is. Don't test him in any way whatsoever. If you say no, that's it. That's your last chance. You only get one chance. Because if they're not, then you're teaching the boys to fail, aren't you? You're teaching the boys to destroy the chances of relationships. And have some kids that learn to break the rules pretty quickly because some people are naturally rebellious, and some people don't really listen when they've been told things. They don't respect authority or whatever. Some people are going to take it really seriously. If you're telling them that if you don't follow affirmative consent, you're going to accidentally rape somebody, which is the implication, isn't it? The implication is, you need to get that cure yes, otherwise you're going to rape somebody accidentally. And actually, it's very strange to be told, on one hand, you can rape somebody accidentally. If you don't being really, really careful, you can accidentally rape somebody. And on the other hand, say, I think rapists should be castrated. So you're telling them, on one hand, that it's something that you can have accidentally, if you're not really careful, take it all. Make sure, you do all the safety checks to make sure you're not raping her. And then go, and if you do, castrate you. Well, make your mind up. Is it something that it takes a monster to do? Or is it something that anybody can accidentally do? Because not leaving the house without your wallet. Is it that kind of thing? How much premeditated evil does it take?
But in terms of a guiding principle, I don't think so. I have grave concerns about a person, notice I said person, who is sexually assaulted needing a court to validate what happened to them.
This is actually a good question. About do you need a court to validate what happened to you? And that's one of the things I've been saying, men being sexually assaulted, men being victims of sexual harassment, or men being victims of domestic abuse. I'm not worried about the legislation. All the girls that sexually harassed me at school, when I was at school, I wanted to acknowledge that something had happened to me that had affected me, and give me trust issues. I don't want to punish them. Not now. I mean, how old am I now? I'm 45. It was like 30 years ago. I think they've all grown up too. I'm sure they're not doing the same sort of thing. I don't want any sort of retroactive justice. And I don't need confirmation by a court or something happened. I just needed it for myself to acknowledge that it was serious. Whereas I've been kind of taught worse things happen to women. It's a bit like worse things happen to sea, innit? Worst things happen to women. Yeah. Worst things happen to sea. That was invented by trawlermen, wasn't it? Trawlermen came up with that phrase. They had coal miners saying, don't know who can blame you, mate. You could be down a mine. And what? Worst things happen at sea, you know. There's a big fight between the trawlermen and the coal miners. The feminists in the room, she said, women know it worse, and they all shut up.
Because there are people who are physically assaulted that can't get justice. We know there are wider spread issues with criminal justice that go beyond this. And no matter what a court decides, ideally if somebody does something wrong, they should be punished. But we live in a system of innocent until proven guilty for a reason. Hello, Miss Rosie. Mama. And no matter what the outcome, there need to be supports for people who have gone through bad things. And you can't place your sense of self on a court outcome, because courts are a roll of the dice. You never know what a judge is going to rule. Judges make mistakes and judges have biases. And it's that's a much greater issue. But short version is, if affirmative consent is the hill you're going to die on, I think that's part of this sort of regressive, political correct, larger thing that we're going through right now. Kitten. That, oh, sorry, sweetie. That cooler heads will eventually prevail on that one. But again, if you're going to give the people pushing that stuff power, as opposed to very strong women like Ash Shao, who are fighting these foolish things.
As I said in the last video, Ash Shao, I didn't mention, but she is one of the feminists that I would share. I would share her articles because I happen to agree with them. I'm more likely to share her articles than your average feminist is. It's very confusing. She's usually saying, well, no, you don't need to exist because there are people that aren't MRAs that agree with you. Okay, well, there are people that aren't feminists that agree with you regarding stopping Roe versus Wade being reversed. It seems a very self-serving way of justifying one's own existence whilst negating the validity of somebody else's existence as a movement.
Because I got comments saying, what's the big deal about calling a woman fat? If you... I'm assuming that's just a troll, because I can't believe, I know the people who watch this channel are intelligent people. And I cannot believe that anybody is actually that ignorant. But God...
There's a difference between calling a woman fat and saying what's so wrong with calling a woman fat. Saying what's so wrong with calling a woman fat is actually a question. And it's a question that needs some investigation, because what are the male equivalents of calling a woman fat? And if they're acceptable, why is one acceptable and the other not? And that's a legitimate question about differences about how we handle one gender's self-esteem with these kid gloves, rougher with the self-esteem of the other gender. Not that I would want my self-esteem treated as kid gloves, but the question is, where's the golden mean? Should it be unacceptable to call that? And if so, what would be the unacceptable thing to call a man? It's a question about etiquette, isn't it? And as a question about etiquette, women are traditionally considered to be the experts on etiquette. Men have to sit and listen. Tell us how to behave. Tell us how to be good. Tell us how to be good. Tell us how to behave. What is the big deal about calling a woman fat? If she's fat, yeah. So what is the deal with calling a woman fat? Well, I suppose, a lot of her self-worth is formed from the idea that she's beautiful. She wants to feel beautiful because her self-worth is tied in for being beautiful. So calling a woman fat is like calling a man a loser, isn't it? Who does that? Who goes around calling men losers?
You think you have the moral high ground? You shouldn't have to resort to those tactics. You should have a strong enough argument that you can bring to the table and argue the facts instead of resorting to name calling and logical. You're resorting to the fallacy with this straw man stuff. It's...
Yes, Liana, I'm sorry. I won't accuse anyone of straw manning ever again.
Have I made myself clear? All right, because I'm really tired of this. And I'm not going to stop doing this content. You're not going to shout me down. You're not going to bully me into submission. You picked the wrong girl for that.
She's taking it very personally. There's somebody that said, this isn't all about feels, don't freak out. Hey, what about the ideas? They are attacking your ideas, Liana. Well, the ones that your regulars have been attacking your ideas, I suppose there may be some non-regulars that have just lost their patience really long ago, that you already know. That's the problem is, your ideas are personal to you. You don't have a distinction between your ideas and your personhood. Because that's what having a faith is all about, isn't it? When somebody attacks your religion, it's how they attack you. Somebody attacks feminism, you feel like it's an attack on you. Because it's part of your identity. I remember one of the earliest experiences of dealing with the MRM. I mean, watching their stuff. I'm watching Dean Esme in the conversation with Boyle and somebody else. Dean Esme raised a point. It was a sort of general group chat. A point. I've got to point out, it's feminism we're against, not feminists. Somebody wrote in the comments. Isn't that just like saying you're not against you're against the KKK, but not KKK members? And he went, yeah. I think that's reasonable as well. I lived in the South. I knew people who were members of the KKK, and they were misguided and bigoted. But they weren't bad people. They were just people. They're just ordinary people with bad ideas. The same's true. The same's true with feminists, really. I mean, feminists aren't bad people. They just got bad ideas. They've got the bad idea that is feminism. And in the same way as the bad idea about Christianity isn't forgiving people and treating people like equals or love being important. I think love's important. I mean, love your fellow man. I'm not talking about romantic love. I mean, that's important too, actually. That's the thing that amygdala was supposed to say. I won't say that. When I say, I'm not a Christian, it doesn't mean I'm against things like forgiveness and loving your fellow man and trying not to judge people. Don't be a hypocrite. Lots of things. Those are good things. Those are good ideas. They're good ideas, whatever your religion is. I don't believe all the stuff about God and Jesus and all that. In the same way, I don't have to believe in patriarchy theory to believe that people should be equal. I can believe that feminists have good aims. I think they're doing the right thing. And they might actually wind up doing the right thing occasionally. Sometimes you do. But they're still bad ideas. And not only a bad person, they're bad ideas. She's taking it personally. It's not, we're attacking her beliefs, and she thinks we're attacking her. Can't separate them. Which is ironic, really, given that she told us not to do that.
And this is unpleasant. I don't like it. There's a reason I keep showing kittens. because this is foolish.
So the kittens are some sort of punishment then. That's a strange relationship with cats people are going to develop. There's a lot of that. Being on the kitten punishment schedule. Every time you see a cat, you'll know you're in trouble with Liana K. Or you'll think you are. You'll be triggered by a cat. You go, oh no, what have I done now? Did I straw a man? Ah! Very strange, isn't it?
You guys are better than this, and if you really want a better gaming community, well, we can talk about these issues without it turning into a garbage fire, you'll cut that out. Because civility and fair dialogue begin with you. And go do that crap on 4chan, go do that crap on 8chan, go do that stuff amongst your friends, that's fine. But we don't do that here.
Seems to me that despite her defending of the guys of Gamergate, she sort of believes the negative stereotypes about them. She believes the negative stereotypes about them, but she thinks she can redeem them. So when she was sticking up for them, she wasn't really sticking up because she thought they'd done nothing wrong. She was sticking up for them because she thought they didn't know any better. Poor heathens. They were deprived of the light. She's sticking up. Well, she is. It's just like I was saying, like she's a colonialist. She's the nice colonialist that's gone over and says, no, I can work with these people. I can help them out. I'm a missionary. She's a missionary. She's the missionary going, oh, I can bring these people to God. They all have a soul, you know. They all have a soul. These poor wretches. I can save them. Yeah. So that's where she is on the Nazi scale. She's on the Nazi scale where she is she's a colonial missionary. She feels morally superior. And culturally superior. And she's authoritarian and dogmatic. Morally superior, she's authoritarian, and she thinks they're all beneath her. But she believes they can be saved. So that makes her kind of a nice colonialist. With the white man's burden to drag these poor wretches up out of their heathen ways. It seems to me that Liana's project with the gamers is one of damage limitation. It's kind of like the reply you get from a company's complaints department. I'm terribly sorry about the poor service you receive from feminism. I can assure you this is not our policy. Yeah, I'm sorry, Liana, but actually feminism delivers shoddy service to many customers across the board in law, in education, in government, in the media, in academic research, in counselling services.
We don't attack the person instead of attacking the issue. Again, you're better than that. Kitten. Where's the kitten? There. Kitten. One more kitten. Oh, Charlie. Oh, sorry, Charlie. Charlie's got issues. Kitten. Kitten. Look how cute. Look how cute. Look at his tummy. And look at these toes. Yeah, kitten. Kitten.
Oh no, what have I done now? Did I straw a man? Ah!